gallery. This meeting has already been called to order because we just stepped out of closed session. So, Allison, for purposes of the record, could you call roll?
Rodriguez? Here. Sherby? Here. Walters?
Here.
Cervantes?
Here.
Flanagan?
Here.
Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, and then, sorry, folks, trying to get my right papers here. Could all stand for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've come to the part of the meeting where we recognize visitors. When I call your name, please come forward. Visitors may address the Board of Education on any item germane to the role and function of the board. When I direct, proceed to the podium, introduce yourself and begin your statement. We ask that individuals refrain from making any personal statements regarding any specific individual, and I reserve the right to limit presentations to 5 minutes. At this point, we have one public comment. Jen Jacobs.
Thank you. I have lived in this community for 70 years. I went to school here, and I taught school here. When they opened up this building, Gale, Steele, King, and Nielsen, I walked through the doors of Nielsen in August of 1969 with very long hair and bell-bottom trousers. And I was there for 35 years teaching fifth graders. It was like going to play every day to me. Now, I love that school, but I also understand that you have to close schools. And I understand that Nielsen is a logical one to close because of its location and the traffic flow. I apprised Superintendent Asplin several months ago that I supported that decision. Having kissed that baby, I think that I need to say something about certain aspects of that campus or playground that you need to be mindful of. There are a number of memorial stones there. They are not gravestones, obviously. They are memorial stones. Nick Young and I were talking tonight about the horrible incident in, I believe, 1987, when Tony Perez and Michael Collins were tragically killed on the W.C. Jackson Bridge. I would like to know what, or have some idea, or at least have you, encourage you to give some idea of what you're going to do with that ground and that building. I've heard one idea that somebody thought it would be a good idea to raise it, knock it down, and sell the farmland. I think that's a horrible idea. And over the years, we have made in this district, 70 years I've been here, we have made good decisions about buildings. Lombard is an example of the renovation. And we have made horrible decisions about buildings. Example would be that purchase of that giant store on Fremont and Seminary that everybody said that was on the board at the time, and the administration was going to do this, that, and the other with it, with all grand ideas, and then it ends up getting knocked down. Now, I, being a fifth grade teacher, I'm not short on ideas. One idea that I have for Nielsen is the logical one, that you abbreviate the perimeter, bring it in around the building, and then you could sell some of that farmland there. And then use that school for GHS North. Now that's one idea. Another idea is that you could try to find a buyer, which another logical thing like they did with the Allen Park School, and which I think worked out very well. Somebody who's going to do right by the building, do right by those things that are currently on that land that are meaningful to those of us who taught there and went there. Or another thing, find somebody who would want to turn it into some apartments for senior citizens. My wife and I will sell 912 Arnold Street and move in. But don't tear it down. Go to every length possible to do something constructive with that building. Please. I feel that that is the prudent thing to do, and I think it's the respectful thing to do. We also have a memorial for Sarah McLean, who was a great help there to our school, and Nancy Lewis, who was killed in a tragic accident in 1994. And we have a tree planted there in memory of these folks. And there's another memorial, and I apologize to the family. I don't know the name of the child. It happened after I was there and passed away. I think it was the little boy who was mauled by the dog. Let's don't forget these people, and let's do something constructive with the building. That's all I have to say today.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, moving into our next agenda, presentations to the board. First up, we'll hear from the student council representative.
Hello, my name is Emma Hawkinson, and I'm the student council president at Galesburg High School. I'm filling in for our corresponding secretary, Jacquard Kelly. She had another obligation this evening. The student council is picking up speed after a restful break, but the next thing on our agenda is the 24th of January. We'll be hosting a blood drive in the Galesburg High School Library from 1 to 7 p.m. This is open to the public, so we encourage community members to come in and donate blood, as well as students and staff at Galesburg High School. We will be cutting off sign-offs at 6 o'clock p.m. though. After that, the next thing is Swirl. The dance will be held on February 15th, and our theme is Emerald City, like Wizard of Oz. The assembly will be on the 11th of February, that Tuesday, because there's not a game Friday and it's a half day, so we've made that decision to move it up to Tuesday, and that will be starting 1 hour before the school's dismissal, approximately 1:40 p.m. And then that game will be 7 o'clock on Tuesday night, February 11th. Thank you.
Any questions for student council? Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ms. Springer talking about recognition of our National Board Certified Teachers.
We did want to honor our we believe we have two, nationally board certified teachers, and if they are here, if they would stand for a second. Christy Malik and Jen Young. Okay, well, if they're not here and you need to understand, we will be giving them a certificate and honoring them, taking their picture when we do see them again. But National Board Certification is a very rigorous process that teachers go through. It's an elective process. You don't have to do it. And it's hundreds of hours of self-reflection, visiting other teachers' classrooms, of written work, self-assessing your own work, taping yourself, doing all the things that are very challenging, and there's certainly good reasons why lots of teachers don't do it, because it does take so much time, and it is so rigorous, but we did want to honor them. So we will be hopefully getting them to a meeting at some point to take their picture and get them here. But we did get notification that they are still and remain holding on to their National Board certification. So we wanted to congratulate them.
All right, next up, we have recognition of our Illinois State Scholars. Mr. Houston.
Good evening, members of the board, parents, students, and community members. Each year, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission recognizes students who possess superior academic potential. Students from nearly every high school in Illinois compete in the program. The combination of the students' exemplary college entrance examination scores and record high school achievement indicate an especially high potential for success in college. To be named an Illinois State Scholar is an outstanding accomplishment that will be a highlight of the recipient's academic record. This year, we are pleased to present certificates denoting outstanding academic achievement to not 13 usually, but 20 this year. So congratulations on that. To 20 Galesburg High School senior students, I'm going to turn the mic over to Miss Ritchie, and she will announce our recipients. And if you guys could, when we're all said and done, stick around for a picture. We don't want anybody to leave. So we'll meet in the lobby for a picture before everybody leaves. Everybody got that? All right. Okay, Miss Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. We'd like everyone to come up, and when I give you the certificate, Mr. Houston would like to shake your hand, recipients, and then all of the board members. So you can walk right around and shake their hands. We're all very proud of you. So I'm going to start today with Janice Abel. Haley Benowitz. Zachary Carlson. Congrats. Abigail Cermak. Benjamin Cermak. I don't see Natalia Chima. Did she come in? No. Will Cipher also could not be here this evening. Nick Dicko. See Nick. I know Emma Hawkinson's here. Emma Koval.
Congratulations, job well done.
Is Minuet Long here? Congratulations. Nora Leahy. Dylan Legate. Kelton Locke. Ada Mel. Christopher Pamatmat. For graduation. Tegan Bren. Tyler Stack. David Bainerman. Kaylee Williams. like to congratulate you all on your past achievements. We look forward to what the future holds for all of you. We'd like to take a picture of everyone. Mrs. Pickrell will do so right outside here in the foyer if you could wait a moment before leaving. Thank you.
Before you leave, what does it take to be selected as a scholar?
So the criteria is a certain threshold of score on the SAT. So it uses assessment data from past years to determine future success in college.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, you know. Nice seeing you, Jennifer. Yeah, I don't see you professionally.
Lots of people say that.
This is nice, but you guys are.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, I know. I was expecting him to come up. This other stack walks up there with a beard, right? Excuse me, I went back to work.
All right. As the room, there's
Family for me, how she
understandable and also expected. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Any item that board members have questions about or would like removed, separated? Allison?
Rodriguez? Aye. Sherby?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Flanagan?
Yes.
Lyon?
Yes.
Next up, focus area 1, relevant skills that lead to employability. First up, we have the administrative report on curriculum. Ms. Springer.
Good evening. You'll see my report in front of you. We just finished an MTSS, a multi-tiered systems of support meeting this evening. I'm divided into groups for literacy and are working on flow charts and some guiding documents for instructors, teachers, and faculty members to utilize moving forward. I would like to have that for distribution for teachers by the end of the semester so that we can start fresh in 2020 in the fall with some guidance. We're also incorporating information we used when we surveyed the staff last year. Professional development, I don't know if you heard, but on January 6th we had several teachers presenting. We even had a community member, Devon Urals, present for us on the 6th. We also had presentations by our co-teaching train the trainer teachers. How about that? Kristen L. Kane, Hannah Oriana, Shelley Golden, and Hannah Berglund. They were able to present, so it was nice to see not only our instructional coaches providing professional development to several teachers. We had opportunities for that as well. We also have professional development coming up this month and next, and I put the list of topics here: grading smarter, not harder. These are all based on teacher PD survey feedback that we took earlier in the year. We also have some behavioral after school and before school opportunities as well to talk about student management and classroom management, things like that. I have a phone call in with Dr. Gorski. That's the one who is leading our equity leadership team. He has a colleague named Marceline who's worked with several school districts across the nation developing equity plans, and we'll be partnering with her to kind of get some direction in that route. We have a curriculum leaders meeting coming up at the end of this month. And at the next board meeting, I plan to show you the winter data from Scantron and Ames Web measures. The Ames Web will be completed. We have a few straggling people from being ill or those kind of things that we're trying to make up testing, so that should be done by the end of this week. So we'll have fresh data for you here come the next meeting. Also, district improvement team meeting is tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. For our board, actually, our group of community members will be listening to the presentations from each one of the buildings. And we've already shared those presentations so they have a chance to look at them ahead of time before tomorrow's meeting. So we have a code of conduct. We're going to begin working on that for this fall. We have a couple meetings set up, and we're going to try to get you some information as far as like a first read in the month of February at the board meeting. So I hope that you'll see that and have some feedback for us. You'll also notice that I put in here a look back at the 2018-2019 professional development offerings during first semester versus this year. And we were, I think, just shy of an additional 70 hours extra this year than we had in the last year. So, and we are also able to provide almost, I think it was 1,090 extra PD offerings or PD hours for teachers for recertification in one semester. So I'm excited and encouraged by that, and I'm sure the instructional coaching pieces help with the delivery of more professional development, but we've also done a lot of CPI training with special ed, so that's also been helpful. But I put that in there so you can click on that link and see that for yourself. Questions?
I have one question on the equity practices in the schools. Do we need to change any of our policies to support that effort, or are we okay with everything?
Actually, our equity policies are in line. It is a matter of actually putting some pieces in play where we indicate what our objectives are and what our activities that are aligned to that. The board policy is already set up for success. We just need to outline what that looks like so that we have a clear plan that we can articulate. Thank you.
Tiffany, can you remind me, do you have an equity team chosen? Like, do you have members that are sitting on that team, or are you still?
That is part of that group that's meeting with Dr. Gorski. Okay, thanks, yes. I'll engage more members, but that's quite a large group of community and local.
So that's what you're using as the, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Next up, special education report, Dr. Mashad.
Special education continues to work on firing myself. Finding new staff for next year. Boy, it's been a long day, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's been a really long day. Continuing to look for staff to hire for next year and for teachers. We're also begun the process of looking at the paraprofessionals for next year and the impact of the building setup and how that impacts where our paras are. So a survey went out to all the special ed paras to talk about what their desires were for positions for next year. Not that we're looking at a lot of changes, but I feel like input from everybody helps as we work our way through the process. So that went out. I've had great response so far, probably about 40%, and I just sent it out yesterday. So hopefully we'll get more response as that goes. During the last month, I did send our report to the Illinois State Board of Education. We had to respond to all restraints or seclusions that were done the last 2 years plus the beginning of this year up to November 19th. So that was submitted to the state board. My understanding is there's this huge mailbox sitting there and they got to hire staff to go through it all. So haven't heard anything on that. We have also submitted 3 restraints so far this year utilizing the new form, which is really good. That's not a lot. So any questions?
What do you mean by restraints?
So when a student is having a behavior episode, physically acting out, under our CPI training, crisis prevention intervention that Tiffany talked about that we provide staff in special education, we focus first on de-escalation, how to de-escalate students that are in a crisis mode, whether it be verbally, physically threatening. A restraint is when we have to physically hold the student to prevent that student from harming himself or others. Using a restraint as a last resort. Such as we've had students that are picking up furniture and throwing furniture across the room, and even though we've evacuated the room, it still becomes a safety concern if they would hurt themselves or break something that could harm themselves. We've had students that'll take their head and bang it hard against the wall, try to put their fists through broken windows. So you verbally try to de-escalate the student. You might need to use some calm physical techniques to redirect the student. But if it gets to a point where there's harm that's going to be caused, then we have to go to restraint.
Which is handcuffs?
No. No. In CPI, we're taught, the last part of the CPI, the crisis prevention intervention, it talks about authorized holds. So in the Chicago Tribune, they talked about some of the most serious, the prone and the supine holds, where you're holding a student face down on the floor or chest up on the floor. We're not authorized to use those in this district, but there are districts that do use those. So it's more of using a two-person escort. It might be just a soft hold to keep them from harming themselves, but we're all trained on what we can and cannot use. But considering some of the intensity of the emotional behavioral programs we have, 3 is really good. So it shows we're using our techniques to try to de-escalate the students.
Thank you. Next up, building reports.
Can we pull up the button? Oh,
Oh, sorry, that's the buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's
buildings.
coming up, that's coming up.
That's,
Jumping
yeah,
the gun.
sorry.
I'm
These
jumping the
are
gun.
Building reports from the school administrators, so updates. So you'll notice in this packet, we have discipline numbers for the quarter. Okay, so I'm still not clear what not method, I'm trying to understand what I want from the building reports to help you give us information that is helpful. And so I need to find some time to spend on what it is that I'm looking for. Because this is, for those of you who are unaware of what building reports are, they're like a monthly snapshot from the administrator level, principals level, to us as a board to let us know what is happening in their schools as far as goals that they have met or created based on school improvement and things like that. So it can do with reading, and it can do with math scores. It can do with programs that schools are trying to implement in relation to diversity and inclusion work that's happening. And one aspect of the report happens to also be numbers, absence, truance, discipline. There's a lot of discipline information here. And for me, I don't know if I need all of this. I need us to know, what I'm looking for, point blank, laid on the table is, what are your demographics in your schools? Who identifies how, gender-wise? Who identifies how, race, ethnicity-wise? And how is discipline being meted out? Who's getting referrals? Because if your school is, say, 69% white and 13% black identifying and 13% mixed race identifying, and I have 69% of your referrals for discipline are being mixed race or black student, we need to understand what's behind that, right? So that's right, and it's on there,
Yeah.
but there's a whole slew of other stuff on there, and I'm trying to understand what we're using that data for. Is that to help us understand that there's a particular time of day that is more?
So I'll interject on that. Part of that is absolutely that. It's time of day, it's what kind of infraction are we seeing? I mean, on the whole, do we have disruptions? What does disruption look like? It also looks like if it's all happening around 4th block or even during the middle of the day, that might indicate to me as a building principal supervision during lunch times or the freedom to move and things like that in the older buildings. But we also put in that demographic data as requested. But I think it's also important to note the month of the year. I mean, you get into October where we haven't had many breaks for a while, and then you'll notice some of those behaviors. So the principals in the buildings will also put in some boosters or behavior incentive programs at that time, because we recognize October is a difficult month, along with December, because we're getting close to a break. different things like that, that principals and assistant principals are always looking at to kind of modify behavior or be proactive towards behaviors. So if you only want a few things, I mean, you're more than welcome to identify those for me as a board, and then I can communicate to principals.
Right, and I think that's where we're still at, because I mean, we received some of the information. I think from my perspective, I kind of want that part. What are we doing with it? Like, you looked at the data, are you seeing something that is putting up a flag to you as a building that says this is an area that we need to look into, that we need to do some work on, that we need to improve, that we need to do some PD, something along those lines, right? That you're using that data in an effort to address what we all know is implicit bias or things like that, right? This idea that, you know, it's modeled not just in schools, but in national crime data. You can't have 13% of the population actually committing 75% of the crimes and ending up incarcerated, right? It's a skewed number. So how are we looking at that, right? Understanding the school to prison pipeline, understanding all of those things, understanding that if they're in detention more than they're in the classroom, they're not learning, et cetera, all those stuff. So I like the numbers, but I also kind of maybe perhaps, and we can talk more, and that's why I'm having it at this table, because I want the audience at large to understand. Right now, if you're watching on the video, I'm looking at a gallery that is actually primarily the people who wrote the report. So, so just, you know, it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. I'm still kind of, from my perspective, tweaking what it is that I'm kind of looking for and trying to ascertain from the data that you're gathering. So I appreciated it. I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around.
Well, I think it was nice when they put when the things happened. In the elementary, it was broken into 5 periods. At the secondary, was based on the period of the day. I found that very informative. The piece that I'm concerned about questioning is they have a nice colored chart of infractions. I wouldn't mind a definition of what that means. And I guess I have to wonder if there's cross-school liability among how they're coding. I don't know.
Right, and I think that also, I mean, I think we are also seeing some of that within what we call absent and what's true, or what's absent and what's not considered absent. So I think there'll be ongoing conversations about how we define different things, so. But we can't define them until we know, like, what people are looking at and, you know, having that conversation and sitting down and saying, well, what do you mean this was a, I can't pull in the fraction off the top of my head. Unacceptable language. I mean, that's one, right? What's unacceptable? You know, what I might think is unacceptable. So, well, I mean, as the time goes on, we'll start to flush it out a little bit. Thank you.
This looks like an awful lot of data. Is this stuff that's automatically generated through our attendance skyward, or are we asking our principals to do a lot of extra work?
There's definitely some extra work in there because of, you have to take the data from Skyward and put it into this format. So there is more labor involved than just print. Yes.
I would
Because like I said,
that.
you know, just going through reading, I was like, wow, this is a lot of data.
I would suggest though it's cleaner for me to look at as a principal on one sheet. If I keep track of it month by month, I think it's less troublesome than trying to go back from August and try to populate that. This is actually the format I use to Cyrus. And so, rather than reinventing the wheel, we just duplicated the effort.
Any other questions about the building report?
See, someone looks at them.
One of my only concerns is, you know, we're striving to get to 80%, you know, on our tests and stuff, and in some of the facilities we have actually seen declines, and that is troublesome to me. And I would like to see us doing more to at least stay status quo, but status quo to me isn't acceptable. You know, we need to continue to move forward and try and hit those goals.
But on the positive front, I'm glad people feel comfortable enough to share those problems. Because if we don't hear about it, that's a bigger problem.
And I think some of the, I mean, maybe I was making too many assumptions, but when I saw some of those percentage decreases, I was thinking the end of the term, like close to the end of the year, you know, where we were at in the school year and whether or not, I don't know, but I think, so it's not, I guess what we're saying is maybe it's not just the numbers, we'd like some explanation behind it, but I hesitate to ask for that because to Rob, you know, Member Sherby's point, it's work. So we'll continue to kind of brainstorm, but yes, your work is not in vain, we're reading them. Just trying to figure out how that's gonna help us, help you, I guess, in the long run, so, okay. Next up, unless there's any more comments about building reports. Next up is truancy discussion, Dr. Aslan.
Thank you. So what you have in front of you is really for your digestion for the next month. So this is in prelude to a presentation next month. So I asked Mr. Spring to lead the outreach workers through a time study so we could find out what work they were actually doing in the buildings. Because when the outreach workers those positions were created, it was it's not 100%, but most of the impetus for that was to curb truancy. And over the course of time, those positions have been turned into kind of catch-all positions. So I asked Mr. Spring to meet with the outreach workers, and he did. And they put together a time study, and there's another report coming to you. It's just not here yet for the three of them. So looking at what they're doing, and then next month, I hope, I believe pretty strongly we can get it done. We will have a plan for you to talk about how to free up the outreach workers' time next year to actually try to do the job that was created for them to do. So this is the beginning, and hopefully, so we're showing you the problem, and hopefully next month we'll show you the solution. But
Each of these charts is a different person?
correct. Yeah, and there were 4, 5, I don't remember anyway. Multiple different days in the month of November that we asked for what they were doing, so that we could get a total kind of picture view over a course of a month what the outreach workers were doing. And so we want to look at that data, which we've been looking at. And then, as I said, what the travel, that'd be in the miscellaneous, I believe. There are some real structural problems to try to give them time to do that. So we're going to try to talk, we're going to come to the plan, we have a plan hopefully, to present to you, to show you how we can give them more time next year to be able to actually address truancy and attendance issues from our students. In addition, in your packet, you also received reports that we've been getting monthly, and we'll start giving to you monthly when we have student withdrawal, to see where they're going. Start to see, should be.
I don't need it printed. Electronics fine.
Yeah. We'll get those to you electronically.
Thank you.
So anyway, that's what you have for tonight. I just want, it's an ongoing process. I promise every month we have a little bit of different information. This is more for your, for a month to digest, and the next month we'll have some discussion.
Any questions from board members in the quick brief look that you?
And obviously, if you have questions over the month, feel free to call.
I guess the one issue I would wonder is people that have dropped, would be curious to know if anybody will come back during the year.
Yes.
I mean, that would be,
No, they do.
I know, as an addendum to this child showed up 3 months ago as a drop, and they've come back. This gives a handle on the fluidity of our population. It has a blank next to it, which we don't know,
Could be old.
never have requested records.
Right. We just don't know.
Does ISB give that information if you ask, if they show them somewhere else?
Well, if they go up somewhere else, the receiving school should ask for record.
Yeah, they should. Okay.
So, as you'll see, there are cases where we just don't know. They call, they don't answer, they're just gone.
When we know that they've transferred, say within district, but to another school that's not a public school, are we giving any reasons as to why that might be? Like, are we asking, outside of this is where they went, are we kind of, do you have an idea of what might have precipitated the move?
On that specific question, I don't know. I know when they moved away, we asked why, but that, I don't know. I'd have to get back to them.
I'm just thinking, so in my other role, right, when students are saying we're gonna transfer out of the college I'm at to another college, you know, we do what are called exit interviews to ask, you know, why. Sometimes it's because we didn't offer the major, that they decided they wanted to be in. Sometimes, you know, there wasn't a, you know, parents didn't think the value of the education matched the cost of the institution. I'm trying to tread very diplomatically here as I talk about my place of employment. So it's kind of stuff like that. So just kind of curious, right? If there's some kind of dissatisfaction with their experience in District 205, and that's what's, you know, prompting them to leave because it's, you know, within an area. I think it's important for us to know that, because not that it's a, I mean, public school can't be a customer service necessarily field, but if there's something that we can do better, I think we should know that. And of course, these are things that, I think in theory, or in practice, I mean, are kind of new, us asking these questions, and so, again, not that we're doing anything wrong, just, hey, let's see if we can narrow or dig down a little bit deeper.
I think it's good self-assessment of what we're doing.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? All right, if there's no other questions. Focus area number 2, facilities of assistance skill acquisition. Everybody has access to the enrollment report. Dr. Ashwin, did you want to expand on that in any way given the conversation?
Well, I mean, our trend is just continues to be to the negative. I mean, we're seeing, no, it's not bad, but once again, we have a 29 student difference from last January. Right. Yeah, it's 44 from last January. Sorry. So I mean, it's 1%. You know, that's kind of in line with what we've been experiencing, and so you can see the macro here of the enrollment, and then you see the micro with the students, and if you filter through a lot of that, I mean, the trend is it's out of the area. I mean, people are moving out of the area. I don't want to just throw our hands up and say we can't control that, but that, you know, we try to control what we can control. Talk about what's within our locus of control, and obviously that, in your point, President Cervantes, about transferring to privates, that's definitely something we can keep a better track of, because that's within our locus of control. Well, relatively, obviously, it's a parent decision, but this area of the state continues to see population outflow. We just continue to see a gentle decline, unfortunately. That's what we've been experiencing for the last, I'd say 4 years, a gentle decline. Before that, it was a little bit more precipitous, but now it's just been somewhere of a 1 to 2% attrition.
And actually, this is, I mean, so yes, retention of our own students is important to understand, but I think another caveat to this
this conversation that the general public may or may not be aware of is that if you look at high school graduation trends, period, there's people who get paid to do this, and what they have been telling us for about the last 10 years is that the number of high school students that would be graduating from areas in the Midwest and the Northeast is actually on the decline anyway. And we're going to see that decline continue until 2025, 2030. People are having fewer children, so families are smaller, and they may be moving out of certain areas in the nation to other areas of the nation. So from the college end, we're looking at high school demographics and numbers of students that are attending, number of students that are graduating, because it's affecting enrollment for colleges across the nation as well. So when we talk about decline in numbers of students and et cetera, it's a national trend, and we're going to see fewer high school students anyway coming up in the next few years. And so when we have some locus of control to keep students in our public schools, I think it's important for us to look into that and say, hey, how do we keep you here? And then how do we build relationships with the local colleges around? I'll just put that plug in there. Okay. All right, any other questions about enrollment? All right, next up, Building and Grounds Committee Report. Member Lyons and Walters.
Allison, can you find that spot on the, or do you have it bookmarked or something for us, please? As you know, we're doing work on some of the buildings. And we have a little update here on that, as well as some issues relative to them.
Yeah, so Member Lyon and I, Dr. Asplin, Mrs. Hams, Pickerel, and representatives from Russell had the opportunity to walk through the facilities.
And Leggett.
And Leggett. I knew I was going to forget somebody. We had the opportunity to walk through the facilities on January 6th. That way we weren't getting in the way of students or faculty as best as possible. But pleased with how things are coming along so far. Here we're looking at King, kind of back from the property a little bit, looking into what would be second grade classrooms. Right now everything is packed gravel due to the weather, kind of meeting some of those timelines that we have to do to get it done. Here we're standing in what should be the kindergarten classrooms. There's a hallway, and then looking at the first grade classrooms, or what will be eventually. And then this is the gymnasium for at Lombard. We are in what will be the commons, looking out into that open courtyard, which will allow light in. Students will be able to use that space. And in one of the future pictures, you'll see kind of how deep that'll be. This view is looking at what will be the learning center. This again is that open courtyard that students will be able to use, and it will extend to where the edge of that gravel goes to. This will be the double doors coming into from the cafeteria, as well as to the left side of that where the dish return, tray return will be. And then this is that space where everything will be cleaned and processed. Looking at steel, this is going to be classroom space. Obviously, and with all of the pictures that we've shown you, fortunately they are somewhat dated, because if over the last week nothing has happened, I'd be a little bit more concerned. Again, just another view looking at hallway and classroom space, and then where it ties into the existing building.
Okay, at Galesburg High School, we're going to start with a picture of the current auditorium. That's one of the topics for discussion here at the board table today. We're looking at, maybe, can we see 2 slides beyond this, please? Oh, sorry, go over to the next, keep going. Forward, keep going. Okay, there we have what's probably, except for graduation, about as busy as the build room gets. Would you agree with that, Jeff? Which group is that that's there right now?
Sophomores.
That's the entire sophomore class. Okay. All right, why don't you go back to the, we can go back then, please. Okay. One of the discussions on today's agenda is to look at the kitchen bids, and the kitchen as projected for that secondary campus included takes up the entire current kitchen and the current cafeteria. So it begs the question, where do students eat? A proposal that's being discussed and that preliminary drawings are becoming available, and we didn't get those from him, did we? No. But regardless, is that the current level, you see where the, okay, good, okay. Current balcony there would be removed, and a wall would be erected and the floor adjusted so that that would become our eating commons. And it would open up into the current hallway that looks on upon the, what do they call it? The courtyard. Okay, so that would be a wall there, making the auditorium smaller to a space that approximately fits approximately 900 people, which would be the approximate size of either our 7, 8, 9 group or our 10, 11, 12 group. It would allow students to have a really nice dining space, as well as a commons that can be used for other functions. And then it would open up on the north, directly across the hall into the serving area of the new cafeteria and servery.
Do you want Allison to pull up the rendering?
Well, why don't we just move, sure, call up the rendering. Thank you. Well, it's got a big hole in the middle of it, I think.
Rectangles and
We will
squares.
fill in those spaces.
That's the low budget farm. We don't get tables, just legs.
Oh, there we go.
Good. Okay, we came up with the legs now. So you see how it's opened up into the hallway? It can be.
This is upstairs, right?
No, this is
Oh,
downstairs.
downstairs.
This is downstairs.
They have to change the grade.
They have to change, dig out, and level off so it matches the current grade. And then the large windows that go, do we have any more the other direction as well?
That's the only one.
That's the one we got.
That we have.
But you
Those are
see the
facing
picture,
the drop-off.
the drawings to the left show the changes. My hope that there's two pieces that would be very nice by doing this. We would allow us to have an acoustically and aesthetically more pleasant student performance venue. I was there and I saw students working very hard at a play 2 months ago, and the sound was terrible. And it's too bad. Kids shouldn't have to perform in a bar. We should be able to give them a place where they can not only do a nice job on the stage, but a nice job, the audience could hear better than we have been able to do it now. And this allows us also to capture a space that's used rarely currently, and a space which we will be air conditioning, and use it more times a year than we currently use it. So used by our 712 campus, and they're building it large enough so that we would address the concerns of the community by having the age groups separate, eating lunch at separate times. So I guess one of the questions here is, that's what they're working on now. What are other board members thinking about when they see this? Right now, these are just the rough plans. Your thoughts, please.
How many seats does the auditorium currently hold?
24. Approximately 24.
And how many do we typically use for, say, the biggest event that we host there would be GHS graduation and Carl Sandburg's graduation.
And I think GHS graduation is once a year.
Right, and Sandburg's is, do we host that more than once? Just the one?
No, just the one.
Their publicist tells me once a year.
How many seats do we typically use for those two?
Definitely the whole.
2,300, 2,200, somewhere in there.
What's the recommended seating on the proposal?
900.
8 to 15. because we need to take some seats out of even, with the foreshortened, because we need to build a room for our sound and light, so we can do it properly.
And then one of the other things that member Line didn't mention, or maybe he did, and I didn't hear it, I apologize. It would change the grading to the seats that remain to allow a better viewing for anyone in attendance.
Be steeper in the new building.
So when we do have graduation, how do we make up for those extra?
If you were to ask me that question,
Yes.
I'd say we have a nice room just down the hall that seats
3,200.
3,200. I was in it last week, Eric, for a basketball game. It has good acoustics. I heard everything that was said by the announcers. It would be a huge improvement in our current yes, the chair.
So essentially, we could have the graduating class on the floor.
In chairs.
In
Right.
chairs and, I don't know that idea.
Which that's what most schools do.
College, in big schools and
Yeah.
colleges.
There's also the possibility, which obviously is weather dependent, and if you need a backup plan, but using the football field, which, other school districts use that as an option. Beautiful facility, take advantage of it.
Well, and there are some meetings that discuss the changes that are coming in the high school campus coming up. This Thursday evening, that afternoon, there's a faculty meeting at 4 o'clock. All the faculty from 7-12 are invited to it. And then at 6 o'clock, there's a community meeting, and both of them are at the Little Theater?
Yes.
Behind the library. So we hope community and/or faculty come to the appropriate meeting and give their input on upcoming changes in that building. And there's gonna be a ton of them. I mean,
And we are posting that meeting as a board meeting, in case the board members for 5 or 6 or 7 Thursday at 6. If you want to come, we're posting it, so we can
not violate
the Open Meetings Act, so if you want to come, if you don't come, we're okay. I mean, you can always post a meeting you don't have, you can't not post a meeting you do have.
Any other thoughts about this possibility?
I think outside of my concern for that major event, and if we can figure out how to make it work elsewhere on the campus, I think that it's sorely needed. I don't think that auditorium has been upgraded in the entirety of the time that the building has existed.
We've put new speakers in over time. We've worked on lights and curtain.
The chairs are still the same, right? Like the same.
Yes.
The chairs in the balcony, I
5
haven't
decades
remembered
of
it.
people
Are they
have
from
sat
the
in those
original
chairs.
building that was destroyed? Because those are just wood chairs up there.
They're the same as the lower, they're just missing condition.
Oh, really?
They're
They're
from a
different
theater in
venues.
Chicago
They're
that
wood.
were used, that we purchased, they were used and were purchased when the building was built.
1959,
So they were,
61 years ago.
no, they were old.
Right, they were used.
Yeah, they were
that long.
used 61 years ago.
Right, but as we said, they don't get sand that often. We're trying to make it so that they use more often. Thoughts?
The area that's designated to be the cap open area and cafeteria.
Comments?
Yeah, what's the capacity for that?
We gave them the number that they had to achieve.
Should we have?
I want to say 500.
Yeah, hold on, let me tell you.
It was half, because
It
there'd
had
be
to
two
be,
lines
it had to be a
for
minimum of
each.
450.
Right,
And
two
so
lines
I
for each
believe
of
they
the.
can fit 500 in there.
That sounds right.
And a lot of that's based on the flow of students, based on their lunch groups.
Each group would have 2 lunch lines.
Correct.
Well, it makes logical sense to put it there based upon where the kitchen is gonna be and food and turning the trays and stuff.
One option they looked at was to build a cafeteria or an eating space on the other side of the server ring, in what's now the driveway. But that would make other problems, and our goal is to invest as much of our resources in the current building and remodel it better than putting it into new structures.
Which I believe later on, there's pictures of the upstairs that would
Yes.
go into that.
Do you know what it is?
Somewhere.
We know it's something.
There we go. There.
Right, and as part of this is looking at how the underused hallway is used on the second floor, and how we could use that space on both sides of that hallway by opening up space for student use. We can capture some small meeting rooms above the commons area, and one of their ideas, this is not talking about school here, we should get, is to put the learning center on the other side of that hallway, so it opens up, and we capture some parts of the current courtyard, thank you, with a 7-9 learning center on one level and a 9-10-12 on the other. So it open up to the commons and open up to a larger space. So I think it's very exciting. I'm excited for it. I'm not sure. Other thoughts? It sounds scary.
You know, with that, what we're trying to achieve as best as possible, as well as continuing that separation between 7-9 and 10-12. You know, as we stated all along, that we will do our very best to do.
Other questions? We move on to our topic relative to the constructions at the secondary campus.
So holding the 500, the capacity, 500 student capacity, that fits with the schedules
Yes.
that we need?
Yes. Yes. 4 lunch periods.
4 lunch periods?
Yes, sir.
Again, how are we going to separate the younger students from the older students? Kind of explain that to me.
You mean completely in the building?
Yes, within the building.
Well, that's not completely decided yet, but that's definitely on the to-do list from the architect to figure out if it's gonna be up and down or east and west or that kind of, I mean, we're still trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to do that. It looks like it will likely be more up and down rather than, so second floor would be 7, 8, 9, and bottom floor would be 10, 11, 12. But the 9th grade classes will be somewhat in between, so that students who are in 10th grade may need to take a 9th grade level, what most students would look at as a 9th grade level class, and students that are in 7th or 8th grade that are advanced may be moving up into those as well. So that's the architect's charge to make sure that that can happen. And at some point we will get a full plan from that, but at this point we don't have that yet.
But we're bringing this to you today because this is really a major change, and they need to move forward on where we're putting the commons. So I guess we need to know this, if the current board that's approved these plans is comfortable with this. So they can invest more time and make it a reality for us.
I am on board because I think in some of our original conversations, we were concerned that we wouldn't be able to do any work to the auditorium.
Right.
And this is giving us a way to do so. So I'm excited about that because, I mean, to take on such a large renovation and then say, but that part of the building's not gonna get touched is disappointing. So I feel like if we have found a way to do that and to meet the needs of cafeteria and to continue to explore how we're gonna do those major events, then I say continue to move forward.
I'm interested in going to that meeting, public meeting on Thursday. I really am. I want to hear what parents have to say.
It'll be one of our prettiest rooms in the district.
Little theater.
Little theater, right. I wish we were using more. There's one more topic we need to touch on. Another issue that I think we feel the need for board input is the possible repurpose of some of the space in that campus for a central office. There's been some desire to have central office closer to where the major issues of the district take place. So I'm not going to weigh in on it. I just want other people's thoughts on that.
And it's not to say that the high school is a problem.
No.
Actually, for one joke.
I think he meant, hold on just a second, I think he meant that half the population of students are gonna be located in that particular building.
Is that what I meant?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I meant.
You meant that, yes.
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 Well, that's pretty much what my joke there is that half our students are gonna be located in one building, it would be wise of us to put our administrators there and not have them working from a satellite office. Which is basically what this is, other than having bright futures.
I will weigh in on that then. Okay. My major problem on that is that, and this is something that I've said as we've gone through this entire process, that I want to spend as much money as we could have on the rooms for students. And if we're going to use a few thousand square feet for an office, that means that number of square feet we need to build probably that many more rooms elsewhere. And every building costs money. And the number of square feet that the architects were telling me that they felt they needed to put the central office for this district would be the equivalent of a little over $1.5 million worth of classroom construction. And I'm not comfortable with doing that.
New information.
That's why I'm sharing with you. But I also feel, and I'm maybe in a minority here, if it's our intention to move them closer, I honestly think the Roosevelt Welch building is on that campus and is already built and would not take up classroom space after next year or next 2 years.
So we've had many discussions about this, Member Lyon and I have. I think it's our job as administrators to give you options and then obviously for you to pick them. So something to consider and fiscally is we do have an entity that has expressed interest in renting this building, leasing this building from us. Okay? I'm not advocating it, I'm not saying we should do it because of that, but just whatever costs there is some on the other side where we would be able to lease this space long-term for somebody who's gonna be around for a very long time. If there was, whether it's at Rose Hope and Welch or it's at the 7 through 12 complex, regardless, we do have somebody who's already expressed interest in this facility. We also have, and with respect to Mr. Jacobs' presentation, we're in discussions with some similar folks about Nielsen as well. So one of the, I'll use the word criticism. One of the criticisms I always had when I would watch with interest what was going on in District 205 when I was not working here was that it felt like a lot of decisions were made in isolation. So what I'm trying to make sure we don't do is to make a decision about one thing without understanding how it impacts another thing. So we are trying to get a comprehensive building plan done here over the course of a few years. So we're just trying to make sure we uncover every stone to see what options are out there, to see what tumblers make another fall somewhere else. So we just asked the architect to put some thought to where would we best fit if it worked out to move us. You know, wherever we are is wherever we are, whatever. You know, that doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure that we have all the options considered because we do need to be respectful of these facilities. And Member Lyon has said many times we don't want to have empty buildings lying around. We owe it to the community to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that we're using these facilities to the best that we can. So without spending a lot of money, I still think it's prudent for us to try to consider all of those moves together. You know, what are we going to do with Gale? What are we going to do with Rose Hope and Welch? What are we going to do with Nielsen? What are we going to do with this building if we move? I mean, these are all, you know, we also have the discussion of alternative schools, and we haven't even brought that in yet. Mr. Springs, his committees, and that'll be coming up pretty soon about where are we going to house those folks. If we do move GHS North here, we have to change the name because it would be south of GHS. So I mean, you know, mostly east. So you know, let's do better than the Western Big Six and the Big Ten. Let's actually use our name and make it make sense. So I mean, these are things we need to be cognizant of. So I think
it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Absolutely not. No. I mean, but we have to make sure that we are considering all eventuality. So with your permission, I think it's still prudent to not spend a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, we shouldn't be putting renderings together or anything like that, but we should be considering square footage and thinking about where does every piece fit best. And so I want to continue down that path until we figure out what the holistic plan is for everything, and alternative education is very much a part of that as well.
Other thoughts? Can we move on to some more pictures? In the board report, let's keep going. The solar panels, going around any of our schools, they're all up everywhere. And if I'm not mistaken, the ones at Steele today, they had guys working on the wiring of those, which is good. They're ahead of here. And here you see them, the ones over behind Galesburg High School that go on for miles.
Yes.
Just keep moving on there. It's pretty exciting, and they're.
It is extremely exciting until they're working on Christmas Day at 7 o'clock in the morning. Christmas Eve, 7 o'clock in the morning. They were working. And that is not on our FYI. So I've seen some Facebook posts, and I don't comment on Facebook posts when it comes to board business because it's really an invitation for me to go nowhere really quickly. So for clarification for the community members who have been watching the solar panel project go forward, and there have been some changes made to the biggest field out north of Gale. None of those changes and none of those time frames are costing the district any money. That is somebody else's budget that is doing that. So I know that some folks had expressed concern that when this field at Gale was initially laid, they did not lay it. They had to change the perimeters because it was too far one direction.
29 feet too far north.
Correct. That was not on the district's budget. When they were doing overtime trying to get the stuff set before the weather and before the holiday, before the new year, again, that was not our budget. So just in case anybody has a casual conversation at, say, a coffee shop and somebody brings up the solar panels, now you have some information about the fact that it is not our budget supporting that.
The last piece that's part of the, in the board agenda, from the building and grounds, are copies of the monthly reports that you'll see that Russell Construction prepares. Can you scroll down to the next one? The next. Sorry. Okay, in the board agenda, the next thing is the reports from Russell. We get those monthly. They have very nice time frames and their goals for the next month, what goals they've met, and they have drone pictures. I mean, I've waved and they never take my picture, so I'm not sure when they're there. But that's all, and that'll be included in the board packet moving forward for those people who want to see those updates. So they're always there. Correct?
Absolutely.
We also have a rendering of King tonight.
Oh, really?
The entryway, yes.
Oh.
So, Allison can pull it up. So this is looking from the office out to the new entryway. And we just got these today. The colors are off just because of being scanned. So our floor will not be yellow. It looks a little yellowish in there, but there'll be a large mural of Dr. King. It's going to be very, very nice.
Those double doors with those gym?
Those are, yes.
That's nice.
And then what you can't see to the left are then the garage doors that will open up to go into the new learning center. So all of that space can be opened up.
The existing learning center.
Correct.
The existing learning center,
Right.
correct.
We're not building a new one.
No.
Oh, yeah, that's not
We're building classrooms and a gym.
But there are going to be garage doors on it, right?
Yes. So then that all becomes one big open usable space. There'll actually be that serpentine furniture there. That will be there, but there's actually a couple of tables so that interventionists or kids can go out there and work in the entryway there, on that serpentine sitting area. We want, it's gonna be a really beautiful area, we want it to be utilized as well.
And I know we've experienced some challenges in fixing small things and making replacements on like sightless windows and things like that. So we're keeping all of that in mind as we pick the materials for our.
We're not doing, you know, custom window shading and things of that nature. Absolutely.
Any other questions?
I think we're done with our report, right?
I believe so. I guess the only thing that so the panels are not live yet. They will be, my understanding is sometime February.
That is the goal.
Oh, really?
But to ease, I guess, if there are any safety concerns for anyone, they will have fencing around them to keep anyone, general public, from being able to access them.
They'll also have what's called a pollinator mix underneath them, so it's supposed to attract insects that will pollinate plants and low-lying, maintenance-free greenery underneath that. So it won't be just weeds, things like that. They have their own agronomist that comes around and does it specific to the agricultural zone here. And so that's all paid for by the solar company. We're not paying.
How much money will the district save by producing its own electricity with these solar panels over time?
Over time, well, the projection we give is a 15-year projection for roughly $1 million. I will tell you that is low. That's based off of a projection for what power will do. It's a very conservative estimate. We feel that that's a very achievable goal. And then there's some other savings that go along with it that we can't even quantify until the next year. It has to do with what's called a capacity charge. That's based off the highest amount of electricity you use on any given day. You have a factor that's applied to your power bill. Well, this cuts that capacity charge down because you're taking about a third of your power offline. So that's a savings that we don't even quote because there's really no way to project what that is. But that's in addition to those savings. So there'll be significant savings to the district over time.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, do I have a motion to consider approval of phase 1 for the GHS kitchen bid document?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Sam.
So what you have before you tonight is the phase 1 of the GHS project, which is the production kitchen that will not only produce for GHS, but it will also produce for the entire district. The work is intended to begin right after the start of the school year, and what did I say?
Start.
Oh, yes.
We're not feeding
Big
kids.
difference, big difference.
Yes, it is catching from Dr. Bashad. At the end of the school year, and we have anticipated completion, substantial completion by August 15th. Were there any specific questions about the project?
I had a number of questions, but I think they've been addressed.
And we are going to be doing an addendum to the current bid where we are going to ask for an alternate bid for a deduct of the bakery equipment, just to see what the bakery equipment comes in. So right now, Matt Davis has done some initial projections on kind of what the bakery would cost us, you know, if we will save any money, if there's any additional expenses. So we want to see how much that comes in at. And so that may be something that we ask for a deduct on and just put the rest of the kitchen in and possibly wait down the road to put in those items.
And that would be difficult if we chose to wait.
No, the space would be built.
Okay.
And
So.
since we're not adding square footage to the building, it's not really a problem.
Will we be adding staff? because of this project, or will there be fewer staff in regard to the cafeteria?
No, we're actually just going to be reutilizing our staff, so we're in the process of figuring out the staffing patterns, writing new job descriptions, because it's gonna look very, very different than it currently does. And then our next step is actually on January 23rd, where we meet with the SEIU Food Service Union to talk about the impact of those changes. So we think there'll be very, very positive changes for the food service staff. They're going to get the opportunity to cook more items from scratch, which is something that they wanted to do as we move towards more prepackaged and processed items over the years. This will allow them to cook again and to provide much more better meals and less processed items for our students.
And will we be able to meet all of the dietary needs of our students? Right, so we've increased number of students, right, who have different food allergies and different food needs or dietary preferences. I know my son started a non-meat based diet during high school, and it was really difficult for him to eat plethora of food in our cafeteria. So will there be the possibility for extended options?
Yeah, those are all things that Mr. Davis is looking at.
Sorry. We're moving into the 21st century, folks. All right. So if there are no questions, Allison?
Shirley?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Milligan?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye.
All right, next do I have a motion to consider approval of sanitary and water module classroom bid specifications?
So moved.
Second.
Who moved that first?
Walter.
Thank you. All right, let me see them.
Before you tonight, you have the bid specifications for the water and sanitary lines that need to be installed for the modular classrooms. So this is really the most crucial piece. The electrical work will actually be a separate bid package that will come in at a later date, but because we have trenching and we have to tie into the current system before the modular units can be delivered, weather permitting, hopefully the end of March, beginning of April, we have to have these sanitary and water lines installed. So that is what you have before you tonight for the bid specifications to put those out to bid.
Questions?
Yes. So do we know exactly where these are going to be then?
They are, and that was in that presentation from.
So that location on what's currently the runway
Correct.
is going to be the location for them?
Yes,
And that affects parking and access to parking?
it does. And so as soon as those modular units are delivered, you know, once again, weather depending, the runway will be closed down, and so traffic will have to be diverted.
How far will people go? They'll just go as far as that circle then?
Well, so actually the entrance to Dayton will be closed off next year. There will be no access through there, but they're going to stage them on the side before they put them together. So we believe there should be no reason we shouldn't be able to keep Dayton open until the end of the school year while they're working from the high school north to put the modular units together.
Okay.
So they come in pieces.
Right, that's what I call them modular.
Correct.
Okay.
And how many are we?
We're 4 modular units with 10 classrooms in each unit. And I actually went to Elkhart, Indiana a week ago Friday.
Sounds like a vacation to me.
It was exciting, let me tell you. I learned a lot about Elkhart, the home of Alka-Seltzer. I learned that. So, and the RV capital of the world. But I went to actually go look at the modular units and was very excited with what I saw. So we've seen pictures, but the bathrooms are much nicer than what we currently have at GHS from our tour. The hallways are nice and wide. We were worried about student movement through the hallways. The classrooms were beautiful for a modular unit. So I was very excited to see our specific units and to see what we're going to be receiving.
Do we have any pictures that can be made available?
And
obviously, it wouldn't be the exact unit we're getting, but
She was at the exact units.
I was at the exact units,
Okay.
but they're in pieces. So it would be, like, I know what they're supposed to look like, but they're kind of in,
It'd be a little misleading.
Yes.
If you just saw it in isolation, you might think, well, this classroom isn't big enough at all. Well, it might be not.
because there's only half of it.
Right, do the kids need walls?
Yeah. Right, right. So, and a lot of the work that they have to do to those, they have to do once they're on site, like putting in ceiling tiles and things of that nature, because they would be destroyed, you know, on the way here. But, no, I was really excited by what I saw.
With the placement of those units, have we considered and looked at flow path of people dropping kids off? Can they come down Dayton, you know, can parents come down Dayton and around the field house?
No, they can't. And we actually have a whole plan. We spent October and part of November coming up with a huge traffic flow plan. So here shortly, I know we wanted to get through the first Q&A that we have with the community, and then we will be talking about that plan for the components that we can. There's a huge safety plan that's been developed. Obviously, we can't talk about some of those specifics, but yeah, the high school's done a great job putting all that together.
I'm also assuming this is gonna impact your professional life profoundly, Mr. Matthews.
A little bit.
Yeah, well, just a little bit.
So when we use Whitecall for practices.
It won't be.
No, Whitehall will be the cafeteria next year.
If it's the field house.
So.
Some other district building.
Right, so I believe Mr. Matthews is on top of that,
Yeah.
looking at the plans for all the different.
And that's yeah, when we get to that point, I mean, we're just gonna have to come together as far as using Lombard and Churchill and Silas Willard and what's the new gym at King gonna be. And, you know, those are just things that we're just kind of having some discussions, but everybody's gonna have to be on the same page and just work together, because that's the only way we're gonna get through it.
And now the swim
we're
team will
gonna-
still be able to use the pool.
Yeah, yeah,
But-
pool, yes. Well, you know, there's a lot of things we'll have discussions about. Some people may have to practice in the morning, sometimes maybe stagger a little bit late. There's a lot, but there's also a lot of unknowns timeline wise too, so.
Well, I'm also, I mean, and I don't know, because I'm not in all the other buildings, I'm just trying to understand how the other gyms are being used, like, you know, the elementary schools. And I mean, I know because of a different hat that I wear, that Whitehall gets used a lot by like the junior leagues, but
Yeah.
perhaps they could start using elementary gyms
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yep.
And, yeah.
And those are things that we're kind of talking about.
Are we doing anything with the current location of the wrestling practice room? Is that gonna have to be used for?
We don't know entirely for sure yet.
Okay.
It depends on where the addition goes. We would like to give them something better. So we just kind of have to wait and figure out where the addition, if it kind of tags onto the back of the field, then we will need that, that space.
What about lab rooms? Whether you need Bunsen burners, and you need sinks, and you put test tubes and store things, and how are those rooms going to adapt?
So we are actually going to be able to leave the 4 labs that are currently in the science hallway.
Our new addition to the 90s.
Right, the 90s edition. Those are going to remain open during the renovations. And then the other classrooms for like biology and some of the other science classes will actually have sinks in them, and we'll have demonstration tables. So we'll be able to do what we need to. And then they can also rotate and, you know, coordinate times if they need a lab space within the school. Then a biology teacher could switch with a chemistry teacher for the day, potentially, so.
And there is a door that opens right into that hallway, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
For anybody who hadn't been in the high school in the last 20 years. All right, any other questions about the modular classrooms? So to recap, they're climate controlled, they have plumbing, woo-hoo.
What we're voting on today is the issue of water and plumbing.
Right.
Correct.
They'll have it dug up so they can have a place to put these things.
Yeah. All right, there's no other questions. Allison?
Walters?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Hennigan?
Aye.
Lyon?
Say aye.
Yes, yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Okay, next, focus area 3, responding to the changing needs of our community. First up is consider approval of our press policies on the second reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Asplin.
Thank you. So as Luke said last month, this is the longest update press has ever created. I don't have a strict count in front of me, but yeah, I can tell you from having to read each of them 3 times, it took me all Christmas break to go through them completely after I'd gone through them before the last meeting.
87 pages.
Yeah, it was brutal. But I would ask, the committee would ask, as we met virtually and sent you the list of our recommendations, but I want to, obviously anybody can do whatever they want after this. I want to toss it over to Luke on policy 550. This is general personnel. It's the drug and alcohol-free workplace, e-cigarette, tobacco, and cannabis prohibition. This is the policy that has been written as a result and in response to, among many things, but in response to the state legalizing marijuana. So Luke and I had a little chat beforehand. I thought he'd give you a little the highlights of what this policy would actually be doing.
So the change here is in response to the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which legalized recreational marijuana.
Is your microphone on?
Probably not.
Thank you.
Legalized recreational marijuana as of January 1st. The proposed policy brings you in line with that. It does allow you to still prohibit employees from being under the influence of cannabis while on school grounds or at any school activity. And it's important to note that the policy defers to the statutory language in terms of under the influence. So the statute has a list of characteristics such as speech, physical dexterity, agility, coordination, demeanor, irrational or unusual behavior, and other observable characteristics that allow the district to make a determination as to whether somebody is under the influence. The practical problem that not just Galesburg, but all employers are facing is there's not currently an equivalent of a breathalyzer for marijuana. So you're allowed to use observable factors. That's the biggest piece to point out here.
Well, and on my notes to the board, it talks about striking out a reference to on-call employees, but after speaking with you, I think it's perfectly okay to leave that in because it's a very narrow specification. And after speaking to him, I feel a lot better about that. I just didn't want to have all the custodial and maintenance folks, that would, if you interpret it broadly, it would seem like it applied to them 24/7, 365, all administrators. That was going to be a problem. But after talking to Luke, that it doesn't really mean that. So that's on that one policy, and I have, obviously all the other recommendations from all the other ones that the committee put together. But debate, ask questions, whatever. Maybe you don't.
And I believe the recommendations also account for any changes that we would need to make sure that our policies are not contradicting each other, or at least there were some I noticed.
That would be, yes. I mean, after going through all these, they absolutely should do that. If one of them doesn't, I apologize, but we tried to go through every single one and get them right.
I think we did. I think the team did, so.
Are we voting on this?
Yes.
And exactly what are we voting on?
All of those proposed.
All of those policies that are there, many of them are just legal updates, but there are some changes to some. And then, there were some others that we had to basically take out theirs and put ours back in because they ignored the ones that were specific to us that didn't reference our collective bargaining agreement. We'd gone through that process when we did this 2 years ago, and we needed to make sure we kept those.
Just for clarification, we're voting on approving them with the recommended changes from the policy.
Correct.
questions.
I have a few questions. Who is our chief investment officer? Is it Jen or Donna? Jen, okay. On 480, it talks about taxable fringe benefits. If we have staff in our schools who use like the exercise room at a place, is that considered taxable?
No, it's not.
Because the definition they give in there, it sounds just like it. But
What we have to do now as a taxable, we have to report life insurance policies over $50,000, your dependent health care coverage. I think those are the only two that I can think of. And those just recently changed a year ago? 2 years ago? Yeah, it's been recent.
Can I go through my list? On 520, it talks about annual sexual harassment prevention training. Do we have a plan for implementing it, or are we already doing
We
that?
already do it.
Okay, so that's nothing new. We did 550. On 7150, it talks about police speaking to students and what if, and I couldn't find there, what if they're there to talk to a student by action of the parent? Do we call the parent in that situation?
Well, the parent would have contacted the police. They're at, yeah.
No, that's not what I
No,
mean.
if it's maybe an accusation of abuse and neglect.
Oh, then no.
Okay, so even though the police are involved,
Correct. If it's regarding the parent, we don't call the parent to let them know that we're talking to
it
the
seems
child.
like the policy doesn't allow for that. It says,
Luke?
So the statutory change here was when you're interviewing a student about a matter that the student was involved in that's potentially criminal. So the statute has sort of a cascade. You have to make a reasonable efforts to notify the parent, document all that. If the parent can't be there, there's a laundry list of people you have to have in the room. But it's geared toward police interviews of student when the student is the subject of the investigation.
and then the last thing I have is policy 620 talks about the school calendar. And it says we're supposed to have 176 days of students. And we have 174 in the calendar we're looking at. Can you explain that to me?
We have 176. So that it means 174 plus 2 parent-teacher conference reference days.
Okay, that's allowed.
Yes.
Still. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? See, I knew I wouldn't have to ask mine because Maury would have them already.
Ask your questions.
No, you've asked. The one that I had the most concern with is, and I've always had it before the policy changed, is how we're interviewing students, given that we have our campus officer, the school resource officer. Because I think sometimes it is, understanding who is the host and understanding the host guidelines and where those guidelines and policies intersect with law and the role of a police officer, because at the end of the day, he's still a police officer even though he's working in the school. So just making sure that those lines are very clear and drawn and that we're respecting our students' rights. Any other questions? All right. Allison?
Cervantes? Aye. Hagen?
Aye.
Lyon?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
All right. Next up, do I have a motion to consider approval of the 2020-2021 school calendar?
That's a lot of 20s.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Esplin.
Thank you. Can you project that, Allison? First of all, as usual, I'd like to thank the calendar committee. They always do a wonderful job of working with us and providing great feedback. What we have in front of you is we're trying to allow for the completion of all of our building projects this summer, while also trying to get out of school as close to Memorial Day as possible. And that results in and I'll provide some feedback that's been given since then. But what you see in front of you, which is this particular calendar that you see here, shows two Teachers Institutes, Friday the 28th of August and then the 31st of August. There is some discussion among the calendar committee about perhaps moving one of those into October, because October is a long stretch without any days off, and there's some concern that might be too much. So that's part of the delta between this month and next month we may be talking about. There's also some concern about when we end the first semester, because not really for our purposes, but for our students that go to Carl Sandburg being able to enroll. So that's not really a huge issue, just so you're aware. We can establish a beginning and an ending day, and we can change when that first semester ends without, we can do that later. So that's not as big of an issue. And that's really only a high school issue, just so you're aware. But you can see here, this calendar we're hoping would be somewhat similar to the calendar we present you next month. We would be going, basically starting with students September 1st and getting out by, if you scroll down to the bottom. If we didn't have snow days, we'd be getting out right before Memorial Day. So it's a very packed and condensed schedule, but in light of construction, we feel like it's a schedule that we need to try to look at. There is not a spring break per se.
Same as this year.
Correct. Around the beginning of April, there's a longer weekend to try to give some people some breaks. And then trying to be cognizant of when state testing is and all the other things. We made third quarter longer. And we feel that if there are snow days, they'll probably be in third quarter, so we probably try to keep them there. And then you can see our emergency days are at the end.
But there's one emergency day on April 1st.
Right, and so similar to this year where we have 2 emergency days around that Easter break, but this would be similar to that we're just trying to elongate a break if possible, depending on when those snow days are called. Typically they're called about now. As we know, last year we didn't like to go to school on Wednesdays in the winter, so this year's been much kinder so far.
This year we have 10 or 12 snow days, this shows 6.
Right, so this year we put in 10 emergency days just because of last year's issue. But this calendar only shows 5 because, one, we just know the weather's gonna be better. And that's not really true at all. It's really just trying to be cognizant of the fact that we have a construction schedule we're trying to keep to, and we're trying to do the best we can with the days presented us. And I can't say enough great things about the committee who does what they can to give feedback, get feedback from their buildings, and then they come back, and we always have a very lively discussion. Lori, I don't know, after Lori retires, I'm gonna have to come back and just create the calendar. I don't know what I'm gonna do without her. Just turn it to her and have her create it. But it's really, they're always looking up to me in trying to create that calendar. So this is very much a group effort, but I will be honest and said, look guys, this is where we have to start and this is where we have to end. So we can be creative in the middle, but that's, we don't have a lot of latitude as we do in many other years.
I've already shared my one concern, that's the fewer emergency days, because I know what an issue it became last spring, the discussion about making them up or not making them up. And I think I'm not sure where the change of philosophy is, or you still want to stretch into June, but I don't know.
Well, the philosophy is we're going to have a construction project going on at the 712 complex that needs as many days as it can without anybody there, site work, things like that. I mean, there are all sorts of issues that come into play. If the board wants to see an extra 5 emergency days put on, we can do it. Just understand that we may run into some construction-related problems. I mean, we won't, but I mean, that's it. It's easy enough to do. It's easy enough to add on. It's just we could be running into.
But if you have them,
logistical problem.
You have to use them.
Exactly. If you put them on your schedule and they are available, you have to use them. Yep. Only if you call out those number of school days. So I don't want people at home going, wait a minute, we have to use those emergency days. Only if we call out school.
Right.
Who makes that determination?
That would be, if you like the decision, I do. If you don't, that's somebody else. Yeah, no, it's me.
Oh,
You're doing a good job this year.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel good.
I think the only concern that I have looking at the calendar is March. Because that, there's like no break, and isn't March when a lot of testing happens?
Yes.
So we're just gonna have to be really creative and nice. Creative with our students and nice with our teachers and our administrators for that really long stretch of stressful seat time.
And we can add non-attendance days in there, it just takes the end of the year, you know, these are all things we can do, I mean.
Can you change one of the institute days in August down to March?
We could, and we talked about putting it in October. One of the reasons we like having 2 days at the beginning of the school year is if it's important for teachers to know, we'd like them to know it all year. So, you know, doing an institute day, I would, quite honest with you, I would rather almost put a not in attendance day in March than put an institute day, because it's kind of insulting to the teachers to say, hey, this is really something you need to know, but I'm not telling you until we're 2/3 of the way done with the year. So, you know, I would rather put in just, hey, we're not gonna be in school today. I mean, I'd rather one of those than an institute day at that time. So, if you have specific feedback on the calendar, you know, I'll send an email document. I've been getting feedback even as late as probably 20 minutes before this meeting started, from the calendar committee. I'll share that out with all of you, you know, before probably this week. And then if you guys have any feedback for me, I'll obviously share that with the group too.
All right, thanks.
So this will be on the agenda for next month. I mean, quite honestly, at this point, you can have a voice vote saying aye to finish it if you want to, because we're not really doing anything other than advancing anything.
All in favor?
Aye.
What are you voting on?
Just first reading.
Okay, next on the agenda, consider approval of the personnel report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions about this agenda? Allison?
Klein?
Oh, yes.
Rodriguez? Aye. Sharpie?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Surratt?
Aye.
Hennigan?
Aye.
Next up, grievance update, Dr. Esplin.
We have no grievance.
Yeah, we're getting out before 9 o'clock. You won't get a grievance on that either.
An update on FOIA requests, Dr. Esplin?
We had none of those.
Look at that. People like us
We're
this
gonna
month.
never get any mail anymore.
All right,
Just 8 now.
and we've come to the last part of the agenda. Comments by Board of Education, starting to my right, Member Walters.
Just want to say congratulations and good luck to the Gale Cougar Bots qualifying for the state tournament, which will be held in just under 2 weeks, January 25th. So, way to go.
Member Rodriguez.
No comment.
Member Sherby.
No comments.
Member Hennigan.
And I saw in the agenda that the Gale students have been, will be going to a tournament, robotics tournament, on January 25th, and I think that's really, really good.
Wonderful. Member Lyon.
Okay, a few things. Erica went to a basketball game last week. And it was wonderful student
you went to a
enthusiasm.
football game
That
this
pep
year.
band, what's that?
And you came to a football game this year too.
No, I went to meet the streaks, no.
Well, that would count.
Okay, I saw the inside of your stadium. And the enthusiasm of the pep band was amazing. I enjoyed watching the athletes do things. The cadets did a wonderful job. And the sound system that I was able to hear everything the announcer said. And it sounded like they were amplifying the band, but I don't think they were. I mean, it was very loud. It was a pleasant evening. Thank you for the comments, board members, on the building things. I had a community member speak to me the other day. It's a spouse of one of our employees, positively commented on the change we made a year ago on the health insurance. It was nice to hear that. They love having the choices that were made available to them as a participant in our health insurance policy. Now I have an advertisement for next Monday's a holiday. In our community, there's a community breakfast in honor of Martin Luther King's the holiday, and that's going to be 7:30 at First Lutheran Church. And I have tickets in my pocket here if anyone wants to buy it. That's,
Or you can buy them at the door.
Yeah, you can buy them at the door. But this way, if you lose it, we still get the money. And once again, I hope the community comes to our meeting Thursday night at the Little Theater to talk about the plans for the secondary campus.
All right, my only comment is to really think, we ask for a lot of data and to help us play our role in helping the district to move forward. And so I appreciate the time and effort that is given to creating those reports, whether it's from teachers giving information to principals, and principals giving information to us, or the folks that are sitting at this table coming through throngs of data that allow us to better understand what's happening on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate that. So, any future agenda items?
I think our building project's gonna keep us busy.
Yeah. All right, so then our next meeting will be here February 10th at 7 p.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Allison?